Feels very strange. But thank you all so much for tuning into the PHNX Coyotes Podcast. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review. I'm Leah here with Petey and Craig, and we are very excited because the playoffs are here. Essentially, it's the best time of the year. One day the Coyotes will be in the playoffs. Today is not that day, but we are very excited to be joined by someone who knows a lot about the landscape of the playoffs because he's a national reporter for the NHL for ESPN, Ryan Clark. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to, I guess, getting to know you and Petey. The guy who looks like one of the Brady Bunch members that's sitting next to you. I have no idea who that is, other than like he loves pets more than Bob Barker. But no, excited to be here.
Here it is. And all true, by the way. He does. I didn't think that.
Seeing it, like he's definitely more of a Bobby, like the smaller guy getting into mischief.
Absolutely.
Than a Greg.
Sorry about the audio, by the way. Sorry, we just had a bit of an audio glitch, but it's fixed. So hopefully you could kind of vaguely hear us. But now you can hear us better for the show.
Our mics were bad?
It's okay. It's a Sunday. We're all a little off our game.
Ryan, thanks for being here. It's funny that I don't have a nickname for you after all this time, but I guess in the NHL we just call you Clarky because that's the easiest way to do it. Is there a better nickname for you? Should I be calling you something else?
Ryan's fine. It's kind of that joke that Shaq made. His mama named him Ron, so I'm going to call him Ron. No, it's wild because everyone's like Clarky, and it's funny because like nicknames are supposed to shorten it, and adding extra letters to Clarky makes my name longer. So whatever, it makes no difference.
That's such a hockey thing to do. We talk about it all the time. Worst hockey, they like add an ER or a Y. It's terrible. It's lazy.
Yeah, there's no creativity at all in hockey nicknames. Yeah.
All right. Well, should we dive into it?
We are here to preview the Eastern Conference Playoffs with Ryan.
Which some are saying is the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, there's some really good teams in the West right now, too.
The regular season in the East was insane. I'm extremely excited to see how things shake out. I've been trying to prep my predictions. I have no clue. I feel like there could be some upsets, but I'll let Craig lead off on our questioning.
Before we get into the Eastern Conference, I want to drop a couple questions on you. And I've been polling a bunch of executives and coaches and players to get their thoughts on this. I'm going to have something else on this on Monday. But before we get started, are you in favor of the play-in round that we had a few years ago? And if so, would you do it NBA style with only a couple extra teams in and then go, as they do 7 through 10? Or would you go back to that NHL format where we had 12 teams from each conference in the playoffs?
If you're the league, you would probably want to go with what the NBA has done, just because when you look at how tight the margins were this season in both conferences, it would make for really interesting environments. I mean, you think about what the Sabres would be like in a playoff setting, especially with how
you have no idea, but that's music to Sean's ears. It's music to Sean's ears.
Buffalo native Sean behind the mic.
Go ahead. I mean, he loves you now.
Good to know. But in all seriousness, a team like that you'd have been interested by. The Pittsburgh Penguins would have been another interesting team in the East. And so that's examples right there. Whereas if you look at the Western Conference, if you're the Calgary Flames, scoring has been an issue this whole season, but they're not the only team in the West that's had problems scoring. I mean, the Winnipeg Jets have been dealing with that all season. The Minnesota Wild, they're not the most prolific team, but they play a structure in which, it allows them to excel defensively. And so you would see examples of that. But again, it's not something you'd want to widen out too much because you think about that bubble year. It made sense because there was so much time left in the regular season. You didn't know what was going to happen. And we saw that this year with Florida. At one point, people thought, are the Florida Panthers out of it? Could the Ottawa Senators maybe be closer, or the Buffalo Sabres? And then you saw how it ended. So if you did that sort of NBA style, it seems like that's the one that would make sense. You get to expand the playoffs. You get to maybe add those teams that were short by a point, which we see every year. But also then there's this. It doesn't muddy the waters for those teams that were honestly lottery teams, because that's something that, again, if you're the league, as much as you want to talk about competitive balance, for those teams that are lottery teams, that's how they eventually get to that competitive balance is, frankly, through the lottery.
Speaking of just playoff format, another one that at least I miss specifically is seeding 1 through 8 by conference. Do you like that better than what we have right now with the wild card, or seeding the entire NHL 1 through 16?
That's a hard one to answer just because if you look at this year alone, and we'll get to this later in the show, but Craig and I joked about this yesterday. There's a team in the Eastern Conference that has more than 100 points that went all in at the deadline, and they're not getting out the first round. If
Yeah.
you're a fan of that team, whatever team that might be, you want to see the system get changed. You want to burn it all to the ground. But if you're the neutral, it just gives you an appreciation for Christ. Winning in this league is hard, which it's like, yes, of course it is. In terms of like a personal preference, honestly, not sure if there is one. I mean, maybe the 1 through 16, just because that would be sort of an
Wow.
interesting dynamic.
Mhm.
Because again, if you're this league, and here's the reality that this league, the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, like Major League Baseball, every including college football is facing, you're trying to find ways to make this sport more interesting because the way you've done things, like while yes, it keeps the traditionalists, when you look at the numbers, especially among millennials and Gen Z, which as a millennial, and Lee, I'm assuming you're not millennial Gen Z like line, like if you look at it, our generation, we don't watch sports like that. Older generations do. And a lot of that is for a bunch of different reasons. Like from the college level, for some people, it could be they feel no sense to alma mater because they paid their money, they got the education, they moved on, or they don't like sports, or whatever the case might be. And then you see that trickle up or down, depending on how you look at it with pro sports. And so if you're these leagues, you want to try to find as many different ways as possible to get people engaged. Like you even hear friends joke, like, why don't they do promotion and relegation in professional sports? Which, if you did, that'd be interesting. But would that be chaotic for a bunch of different reasons? So it seems like with these formats, it's whatever the league chooses. You hope that if it's the format that they think is the best one, it's the one that keeps the people most engaged. And right now, it seems like people are engaged because it's the playoffs.
Yeah, I'd be fascinated to see the 116 thing because you're crossing over conferences. Then you could have potentially a series between Boston and LA, which creates crazy travel issues. You'd have to factor that in to the schedule so that some teams, like if there's like a Jersey Rangers series and then there's a Boston LA series, you got to factor that in for
Absolutely.
those teams. But it's also fascinating to think about if you just seeded them 1 through 16. That would definitely draw people's interest. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I think the travel is the biggest issue. I like the 1 through 8 for your individual conferences, but I think there's got to be a way to make this 82 games is a long, arduous season, and it has to mean more. You got the Devils and the Rangers going head to head, and one of them is, as you said, is going to be out.
Yep.
I think the 1 through 8 has some merit, and I don't know about the play-ins yet. We'll have to talk about that more, but this is the hardest trophy in sports to win. The Stanley Cup is more physically challenging than any of the other major sports. It's really, really hard to win. So I guess if you got to beat everybody anyway, might as well start trying to play them in the first round, I guess.
Yeah. Is that, we're going to ask you this anyway, but is that the most compelling storyline then for you in the Eastern Conference? Is that overarching reality that one of these teams that, as you said, went all in, topped 100 points, is still going to be out?
There's a couple. I mean, that's one of them just because, again, we're looking at what these teams were able to move on from to make it happen. Look, it wasn't that long ago we were talking about the Rangers and the letter, and people wondered, well, how long until that letter turns into reality? And now we've seen what that reality is. It's just a matter of like, what's it going to look like going forward? Because with the Rangers, you look at those young players, it's been the crux of what they've done. But at the same time, here's the thing about really good young players. You're going to have to pay them. And so some of these deals that they've been able to make now, they're not going to be able to make 2, 3, 4 years down the road. I mean, maybe they can if there's a third party buyer that's willing to broker, but at the same time, will you have the assets to make that work, or will another team who was in the position that you were in not that long ago be able to will they be able to be the ones who have that strength to do it? So that's one of them. Another one is this, and it seems like we don't talk about it enough. Like, yes, we talk about Boston, and understandably so, because it's this Goliath of a season, but we've still yet to see anyone figure out the Tampa Bay Lightning in the Eastern Conference. I mean, ever since 2018-19, which that's the other like interesting part about Boston, which we'll get to later, is the Lightning had that super team in 18-19. It looked like they were a juggernaut that was just going to walk over everyone. They lose to Columbus in the first round, and it leads to all these questions. And then ever since then, the only question has been how long will it take them to get back to the Cup final? And if it's not for Colorado last year, we could be asking another question of where do they rank among the all-time dynasties? And in some ways, again, post Montreal Canadiens, you could be having that conversation now about what the Lightning have built. And so to see what happens in that first round matchup with them in Toronto is going to be absolutely fascinating. But another one is really going to be what happens with a team like the Carolina Hurricanes, because that's another team that we've seen build and build and build. And you think about it, they check all the boxes in terms of offensive metrics, defensive metrics. They've got depth everywhere. They've got goaltending. I mean, the goaltending's so good. They have Peter Kochetkov in the minors that a lot of teams would love to have. So if you're looking at three storylines, probably those would be the three, aside from the obvious of Boston.
Yeah. I just kind of going on that note, I'm curious, what is the best series for you in the Eastern Conference? Kind of the one you're circling.
Leafs Lightning, because there is so much at play. Without giving too much away, which I keep saying that, but yet clearly we know where this conversation's going. But it would probably be that one, just because, again, with the Lightning, they are the standard in the Eastern Conference. Really, they're the standard in the NHL. Yes, the Avs won the Cup, but when you look at what teams are doing in this league in terms of trying to build through the draft, in terms of trying to find these gems that are these undrafted players, that one day you look up and you go, where did this come from? What did this team see that no one else did? The Lightning have been sort of the leader in that department. And not only that, but it's not just the way they draft, it's the fact that they can hit on picks beyond the first round. Whereas if you look at Toronto Maple Leafs, I mean, they went all in this postseason in terms of just what they did at the deadline. You think about some of the contracts that are up, some of the players they have to re-sign, some of the players they have to let go. What happens with management? I mean, we just saw in Pittsburgh that if you don't get things done, they will move on from you. We just saw in Anaheim that even though like you have a coach that's in a situation where, okay, in some ways, Anaheim's in its desired place of maybe being in a lottery spot, they felt it was time to go in another direction. And same thing with Columbus. So what really happens in Toronto if they don't win in the first round? That's a massive question.
Yep.
Yeah. And just on that note, like, what do you think? What do you personally think happens? Yeah. And obviously, like, there was all this talk last season, but I think because Toronto took it to 7 games with Tampa and it was really so close, it could have gone either way. Maybe there was a little bit more wiggle room, breathing room for the coaching staff and the GM. But what happens this year? And let's just say it's the exact same situation. They take them to 7, they lose. What happens if they can't get past Tampa this year?
If you're MLSC, then you really might have to have a serious conversation about, is this the best group for you to lead this franchise going forward? Because that's another year in which you've been ousted. Now, on one hand, yes, we just finished talking about the Lightning and explaining how hard it is to win, especially when there's this brooding juggernaut sitting in Tampa, Florida, that no one in the East has seemed to figure out. But yet, if you're the team that figures it out and then you're able to keep going, then why would you break that up? But in terms of if you're the Leafs and what you want to do, I mean, you're trying to make a decision that you think is going to help you later down the road, just because when you look at cap friendly, which just I have off to another screen. So if I look away, this is why. I mean, you think about what they've got coming up. I mean, Kerfoot's going to be a UFA, Camp O'Reilly, Noel Chari, Justin Hull. I mean, you've got to figure out what you're going to do in net with Ilya Samsonov. He's an RFA, but the year he's having, what kind of money are you looking at there? Then, of course, there's the big one of who has one more year left on their deal after this season with Austin Matthews. And right now, if you're the Leafs, it's like, if you don't win in this round, it seems like maybe you have to start asking questions, not just about management, coaching, but what does this roster look like in terms of what is the best way for you to go? And so in terms of what happens if they don't get out the first round, Leah, it seems like there's so many questions you can answer. If they get out of the first round, of course, the natural inclination to ask is this the team that could win the East? Because, you know, look, they knocked off Beowulf or Grundle, depending on how you look at that analogy. But it's more than just can you beat Tampa. It's can you win in the second round? Can you get to the conference final? Can you get to the cup final? So again, I know that's not the strongest answer, but the reality is we just don't know because so many things could happen.
And the biggest problem for me with Toronto is they knew what their biggest need over the summer was, in my opinion, was their goaltending. And it's been a problem in that franchise, and they thought it was a problem with Frederik Andersen, and they've moved on year after year. It was Jack Campbell. And now they go to an older Matt Murray who hasn't had success since Pittsburgh, and now he's not playing. And so for me, I question the management's Their biggest need was goaltending. Did they address it? Samsonov has been good. Can he do it in the playoffs? Well, it'll be interesting to follow that team because they have to beat Tampa or I think they're gone. And I don't know if they can do it. I keep going back to the goaltending. I think the hotter of the teams going into the playoffs is Toronto this year. And I think that bodes well for the Maple Leafs.
Well, before we continue, if I may, PD, like that's the thing about goaltending is, and we could do a podcast off that alone, but let's take two teams, for example. There's the Washington Capitals that when you look at it between them and the Penguins in terms of who drafts and develops goalies that go to the NHL, the Washington Capitals have done a lot. I mean, you think about it with what they've done with Samsonov, Philip Grubauer, Braden Holtby is another one, Michael Neuvirth is another one, Semyon Varlamov's another one. And again, Pittsburgh, we talk about it with Fleury, Jerry, Murray, the Smith. I mean, again, like we've seen so many examples of this. But then you look at a team like, let's say, the Colorado Avalanche, where like one of the under-discussed things with the Avs is third straight playoff appearance, third straight different starting goalie. We went from Philip Grubauer to Darcy Kemper to now Alexander Georgiev. And the reality is just trying to find ways to make it work with a goaltender.
Right.
Like that's the $1 million question, because I mean, Craig and I've talked about this too. You think about 2000, the Islanders took Rick DiPietro over the first round pick. The Rangers take Henrik Lundqvist with the 7th. And we saw how that turned out. I mean, it's not necessarily oops. It's just more, it's so unpredictable.
You just don't know.
I mean, it took Jack Campbell a while to figure it out. Whereas if you're someone like Ilya Sorokin, Igor Shesterkin, like it's almost like within day 1, day 2, day 3, all of a sudden you're this juggernaut. So again, it is so hard to predict.
It's almost like you should go to Russia to find your goalies. And I think you wrote about that recently.
Hypothetically, potentially, yes. But in all seriousness, I mean, it's kind of much like quarterbacks, and not being funny, but the three of you live in a city where that's been the big question for that franchise is, can they find a quarterback? It's been that way since Jake Plummer and since Kurt Warner and Carson Palmer.
How does he know football too? How do guys do that? What is it with you writers? That you guys, but you guys know
everything at some point.
Like you guys know everything. How does he know that? God, I struggle to know the stuff I read about every day. Unreal. That's amazing, Ryan.
This sounds like a good place for an ad break.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, we let Ryan know before the show this is a very relaxed atmosphere, and clearly because PD and Craig are both drinking, and PD, of course, going with the Suns Brew.
Yeah, well, it's Suns playoff day.
Yeah. So Suns Brew is a must.
Suns Brew is a
Four
must.
Peaks.
How is the Suns Brew?
It's actually really good.
Okay.
What are you drinking?
It's a light lager. It's good.
Right here.
Holmberg Bound?
Yeah.
By 4 Peaks? Wow.
Yeah, it's a little heavier red.
It's a red.
Kolsch.
It's a red ale, and it's
This
good.
is good.
Oh.
This would be good with a lemon in it too.
As soon as tip-off comes, I'm going to be drinking 4 Peaks, and definitely grab some before the game tonight at 5 o'clock.
They don't have that in Seattle either.
Yeah, no, sorry. But
I'm drinking a 2023 Invisible. Really light. You don't feel it at all. Fantastic.
Oh, man. And we're just about a week and a half away from the NFL draft on April 27th, and the best place to take that in is at the 4 Peaks 8th Street Pub. You can register for free in the link in our show notes to take advantage of beer specials. Johnny and Bo will be broadcasting live from 4 Peaks for the Cardinals draft show, so be sure to check that out. If you want to drink, you got to be 21 or older to enjoy responsibly, but you don't have to be 21 to swing by the 8th Street Pub because they have amazing food as well. But if you if you don't live in Arizona and you want to take all this in from out of state, including watching the Suns, watching the draft, check out Fubo TV because they have pretty much everything. They have 140 plus live channels of sports shows, movies, and news. You can stream live TV from any device. You can watch most Arizona sports. It's the lowest price. And like we said, draft coming up, Suns playoffs are on. So it's the best time to sign up for Fubo. You can watch the Suns on Valley Sports with Fubo TV. Use the link in the description to sign up for 15% off your first month of Fubo Pro. All right.
Okay, we're going to come out of this break with your hot take on this because that's what I'm all about. You know that I'm all about hot takes. So if the Boston Bruins do not win the cup after a 135-point record-setting season, will it be considered a choke?
In some ways, it depends on what round they're eliminated in, but also what did they encounter along the way. I mean, if this is a team that, let's say, gets to the Eastern Conference Finals and Linus Ullmark, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, and Patrice Bergeron gets injured, that's not necessarily a choke. That's just a run of bad luck. So look, it's hard to say. Now, is this a cup or bust team? Absolutely. It's being presented that way. And there are going to be some people who say whether they get knocked out in the first round or game 7 of the cup final, if they don't win it, you could consider it a choke. But it seems like in order to be really fair about this, you have to look at the circumstances. Like if this is a team that goes fully healthy, gets to the cup final, loses overtime in game 7, no, if you're them, you're disappointed you didn't win. But to say it's a choke, no, because again, like we know how competitive this league has been. But whereas if this is a team that gets knocked out in the first round, it's a very interesting discussion to say the least.
Yeah.
But
So
again, it all depends on the circumstances.
you're saying nuance matters.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What a concept.
See, another
Nuance.
writer thing, nuance. I gotta get my thesaurus and my dictionary for you two.
Well, you can't find nuance on social media. Just there. Can I use it in a
Oh, you
sentence?
cannot.
That's
There you go.
Everything's-
I'm
Yeah.
staying away from that one. Everyone on social is right about everything all the time. No one is wrong. Everyone is perfect.
You are
Yeah,
you are a coward. You are a coward.
Hey, look, sorry we all can't be like you where it's like, hi, everyone. This is Craig Morgan.
Okay.
You might know me from other podcasts such as Fido, more like Friendo. So, yeah, sorry, Craig.
I like this.
All right.
Oh man. Okay, if there's gonna be an upset in the first round, what will be the upset in the first round?
In the East.
In the East, yeah.
Not saying this will be an upset, but the Florida Panthers are a fascinating team because of how hot they have been. But is it enough to get past, again, the Goliath that is the Bruins? It's hard to say. Conventional wisdom leans towards no, but don't be surprised if Florida makes that a series. But in terms of upsets, Seattle beating Colorado, I mean, I know it's West would be one, but in the East, again, if Boston were to lose, that would be the one because Toronto, Tampa, you're talking about two teams that, like, it didn't matter where they were seated, but there's cup expectations. You could argue the Isles maybe would be, but Greg Wyshynski made this point the other day, and it's really true. The Isles are a team that is built for the postseason with such a constricting style and a goalie. So, like, in some ways, for some, that might be an upset. But when you look at how the Isles are built, not necessarily. And with the Devils, Rangers, like, that's not an upset. Like,
That's a toss-up.
like that's literally a toss-up. Like, there's no, like, oh, one team is here and the other team is here. No, like, they're both, like, there. It's about as hard as it gets. So that would probably be the answer.
So you've kind of answered this question for one of them. Do the Wildcards have a chance in the East? Like when you look at how top, I didn't want to say top heavy, but the East is so good. Do the Wildcards have a chance in both of these series?
Realistically, yes. Just because, I mean, let's start with the New York Islanders. Like, we've talked about this a lot where the strength of the Islanders is they're a team that's so used to playing in these tight games. They have a defensive unit and, again, a 5-player philosophy that is paid off time and again, even with a new coach under Lane Lambert. I mean, you look at some of the defensive metrics for some of their players and how heavy a workload they have, but then you're talking about a goalie that has consistently been amongst the 3 to 5 best in the league and Ilya Sorokin. And so it's completely within the realm of possibility to see a team like the Isles be able to do well. Whereas when you look at the Florida Panthers, again, like this is sort of the difficult part because on one hand, it feels like there are more questions with the Panthers than there are with the Bruins because, like, even though, yes, Jim Montgomery's in charge of the Bruins, we know what they were under Bruce Cassidy. We know what they are now. Like, maybe we didn't see this happening from start to finish in terms of game 1 to 82, but you had an idea of like what this team is and what they can be, which is the Bruins are interchangeable. They can play physical, they can play speed, they can play technical, like they can do everything. With the Panthers, until last season, that was a team that never got out the first round. And then it did, and then it played Tampa, and we saw how that ended. And yet we don't know what the personality and the profile of this team is in the sense of what will it look like in the postseason. But then again, we were all asking questions about were the Panthers good enough before the deadline because they couldn't do anything. And look how they answered that. Like Matthew Tkachuk was electric.
He was.
Alex Lyon
Yeah.
was one of their most important players. And so at this point, it seems like to say that the wild card teams have a chance, yes, anyone thinking this is going to be a sweep, I mean, it's not to say that that can't happen, but both these two wild card teams look good enough to where they could force the issue and take this beyond 4 games. So they have a chance, but to say upset, it's so hard to rule out because the teams they're playing are teams that, again, people think could win the whole thing.
And that's when I look at this, how important the regular season is in the 82 games. And again, I'm just speaking hypothetically. You look at Florida, 1 point behind the Islanders. If Florida can get over the Islanders in the regular season, they're playing Carolina. And I like that matchup, Florida versus Carolina. Svechnikov's hurt. I like Florida's pace, their speed, better than against Boston. I think Boston's just too dominating. And for the same reasons Ryan said, the Islanders might be a better match against the Boston Bruins because of their way they can smother and defend you, and their goaltending can come up with big games. I think we would have had better series if it would have been Florida, Carolina, but I digress. So I'm going. What's that?
You're tipping your hand on your picks, aren't you?
No, I'm just throwing some stuff out there. That's right. So Ryan, I want to put you on a spot on a couple of these series, and I want to go to the one that I think is the closest on paper is Jersey and the Rangers. And I want to know your thoughts on that series. Is it going to come down to the goaltending? Is it going to be who can outscore who? Is it going to be the young skill versus the veteran leadership? Who gets out of that one and who survives the Battle of New York, New Jersey?
To answer that first question, it's everything everywhere all at once. All the things you just said are going to matter because look, goaltending is something that when you think about the Rangers, it's one of the core tenets of what's made them successful. With the Devils, there have been questions, but when you look at their defensive metrics, I mean, it's one of the top 5 defenses in the league. When you look at their structure when it comes to high danger goals per 60, scoring chances allowed per 60, shots allowed per 60, high danger chances allowed per 60. I mean, you name it, like this is a team that does absolutely everything. And then they've just added Luke Hughes, which how does that change the complexion of that team in the event that he plays, especially from a puck moving standpoint? And so in terms of like what it's going to take, I mean, it's seriously going to take one, which team's defensive structure is going to be consistent, because it's not a question of who can score goals. It's a question of how can you stop them? And with the Rangers, it's a structure that works, but it's a goalie that, again, is one of the 3 to 5 best in the league in Igor Shesterkin. Whereas if you look at the Devils, it's more about how does it work as a 5-player unit in support of what's going on in net. And in terms of just who has the edge, there is no edge. And in terms of how this ends, it's honestly going to be someone in 7. And in terms of who you pick, you could say the Rangers, you could say the Devils, and there's honestly not a wrong answer because, they're both so damn talented. Like, okay, let's look at the Rangers. Yes, we talk about the forwards, but Adam Fox, if it's not for Erik Karlsson scoring 100 points, Adam Fox, for a lot of people, would be the Norris winner. And for a lot of people, he is the Norris winner. Like, that's been the interesting thing with voting from talking to other reporters is like, people have said, man, Erik Karlsson had a really good year. But have you watched the Adam Fox highlights? And it's like, yes, he's really, really, really good. But then on the flip side of that, Dougie Hamilton had the best season of his career. Like, he has moved the puck in a way to where it makes them even more dangerous. And so again, for all these reasons that you could say this team has this other team has that. Okay, you look at the Rangers wingers, like it's about as good as it gets. You look at what the Devils have on the wing, like, yo, Andre Palat's won cups. Like, Jesper Bratt, like that dude is one of the more underrated players in the league with how he can finish around the net and can create for others. So again, it's just there's no real advantage one has over the other.
That's my favorite series of the first round, without a doubt. All right, buddy. Listen, we pulled you away from family on a Sunday. I really, really appreciate you doing this. I miss you. Hopefully, I'll see you down the road. Likewise. But we'll always have Vancouver, if nothing else. But thank you, Ryan, for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it.
Before we get off, so let's share with the folks what the Vancouver story is. So when we were teammates at the Athletic, we all stayed at this hotel in Burnaby, which is a suburb. And so every night, Craig, Joe Smith, and I had eaten at the same restaurant in the hotel, which was a steakhouse. But that last night, Joe and his wife had already left. So Craig and I were like, hey, let's go get dinner somewhere. So there was a Chinese restaurant right next door. And we're like, okay, this looks great because like Chinese food in Vancouver, like It is phenomenal. And so like we walk in, and of course, we're the only non-Chinese people in this place. And they're like, how about we put you in the middle of the restaurant? It's like, how about you just put us in the corner? Like, no, we'll put you in the middle. So here we are. And then Chuckles the clown over here is like, excuse me, hi, yes. Can I get a fork, please? What are you doing? Everyone else using chopsticks. You're like, hi, yes, can I get a fork? It's like, doing that stand out even more. Like, even if you're terrible with the chopsticks, like, try first. Like, if you had waited 15 minutes and said, excuse me, can I get a fork? It's like, yo, at least A for
You
effort.
tried.
Like, C- for execution, A for effort. But Holmes gave up from the jump. And it's like, what are we doing? Like, really? Like, what are we doing? And you're just like,
God.
what? I didn't see the harm in asking for a fork. And it's like, of course you didn't see the harm in asking for a damn fork. Like, Jesus, this is why I can't take you anywhere. So ever since then, any place we go,
Bougie
it has
Craig.
to have, it has to have a play place and a toy. Because Craig, that's the way Craig can survive. Because there are children that can handle chopsticks. Our cats can handle chopsticks. Craig cannot handle chopsticks.
As
So
someone who
that's
has
the
had
story
sushi
that
with
we wanted to
Craig,
tell.
I
Yeah.
can confirm
God.
that he does not use chopsticks.
I'm
I wasn't even
terrified.
gonna get into Vancouver, and then you're the one who brought it up. Like I see Cale Breedy's like too bougie for chopsticks. Like yes, Craig was too bougie. Like he walked in with his pinky and he's like, "Excuse me, if I could get a fork, thank you." And it's just like, man, damn, can we just get out of here?
Lord.
I love it. Wow, that was a great way to end.
Terrified that that's going to become a clip that's going to be shown
Yeah,
over
that'll
and
be.
over
Yeah,
again.
that'll be a clip.
That we'll use that again.
Yeah, we'll just save that for later. Well,
All right,
Ryan,
buddy.
thank you so much.
I'll
Thanks,
pay,
Ryan.
I'll pay you
Of
back
course.
later for that one. Thank you.
Really
Oh,
appreciate
no,
the
you won't.
insight. Thanks, man.
Bye,
Take
Ryan.
care, everyone.
Oh man, that was awesome.
But are you surprised about Bougie Craig
No.
at all?
I knew that about the
Or else,
chopsticks.
or see one of those ones that gets, can I get a rubber band? You ever see those rubber band
Oh,
chopsticks
the ones
they use
with
for
like
kids?
the training wheels.
Yep, the
Yeah.
training wheels. Yeah.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh. Well, thank you again to Ryan Clark of ESPN for joining us to preview the East. Lots of compelling stuff. And
You didn't ask him for his picks. I thought you were going to ask him for his picks.
Well, we'll
get
give
to it.
our
We gotta
picks.
go. I don't want to give ours away.
yeah, we'll give our picks in a second.
All right.
I think Ryan did a great job in promoting
Set
Craig.
the table and
Craig
Oh.
as an individual as well. So if you want to support Craig in his bouginess, become a diehard at gophnx.com so you can read Craig's weekly diehard stories. You can also join our Discord where we are actually doing a bracket challenge. I didn't even tell you guys this, but we are. We're going to do a diehard
better
only.
come out like now.
There's 15 brackets filled out already.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't.
It's a
go in there yet.
diehard only
I'll go there
bracket
today.
challenge. So if you're interested, the link is pinned in in our chat on Discord, and then the password is there as well. I will not say it here because you must be a diehard, but just one of the many perks, including 20% off merch, 20% off events, and just keep your eye on the PHNXLocker.com because there's always new stuff dropping, including maybe something later, but that's all I'll say about
Is there
that.
a hint about that?
I don't know. So become a diehard today.
I gotta read the emails.
Go phnx.com/diehard.
Oh, I ain't going there.
Sean was out at Illegal Pete's yesterday for their live show there. How many margaritas did you drink, Sean?
2.5 to 3, maybe.
Okay.
See, I'm feeling
only
day
$3.
drinking
Very
right now.
subdued
Margarita would
today,
be good.
Sean. You're very subdued today.
I'm
not
thinking
used
day
to
drinking
this.
is money. I'm ready today.
Well,
Let's go to Legal
and
Pizza.
at Illegal Pete's, there was $3 margaritas
Buddy,
yesterday.
Can't
Like,
argue
I
with
was
that.
so...
And queso.
Oh, the queso. Don't even get me started. We
Don't get
obviously...
me started.
We love Illegal Pete's, and they have delicious ingredients and customizable options. It's the perfect way to treat people to a culinary adventure they'll never forget. And if you want to book a catering order, head to catering.illegalpete's.com. Illegal Pete's, your go-to spot for burritos, buddies, and beer. All right, before we give our picks, Craig sent in a lot of really good stats yesterday, so I want to make sure we go over these before we make our picks. Maybe this will help us.
Cool.
We
I
have
thought they were
stats?
going to be ignored.
We have
actually.
stats. We have numbers. So let's start with the wild card stats. We got 2 wild card teams have won 2 or more rounds in a single postseason. The Predators advanced all the way to the Cup Final in 2017. The Hurricanes made it to the Conference Final in 2019. So think about that.
That's only happened twice that they won 2 rounds.
Yes. So
Okay.
when you're considering picking Panthers or Islanders, consider that.
Okay.
Next, we'll look at the home ice advantage advantage, I guess.
Yeah, I found this interesting.
This one was really interesting. So when you break it down by rounds, and this is since 2012, so basically the last 10 years, by round, the percent of series won by the lower seed. And it was interesting going round by round because in the first round, 41% were won by the lower seed. That's almost half, a little less than half. In round 2, 47.5 were won by the lower seed. The conference final, 65%
won by the
lower seed.
The lower seed.
And lastly, the Stanley Cup Final, it's
the higher seed. Sorry. We're reading that wrong.
So you're backwards?
No. Series percent won by the lower seed.
But in the conference final, 20. Oh, it is 13.
Yes.
God, I thought it was. Sorry, my bad. See, no glasses.
Yeah.
Oh my
Just
God.
I'll shut up.
But anyway, I just think
But
that's
that's a
interesting.
crazy
Not good at
percentage,
math.
isn't it?
In the
Conference final.
It is crazy.
So
Crazy
when you're
to me.
making your bracket in our bracket challenge, keep that
Be
in
aware.
mind. And for today, when we're making our picks, keep in mind that lower seeds have won 41% of the
Almost.
first round.
Half.
So to me, don't choose all of the
Yeah,
favorites.
but I like all the favorites.
Well, you
Yeah.
can do it. Okay, couple others. These are fun. We'll look at the President's Trophy curse, which we kind of implied when we talked about the Bruins. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it because for this historic season that the Bruins have had, I mean, teams that have gone on historic runs in the regular season have choked a lot.
Yeah.
And you look at the last 10 years again, the Panthers lost in the second round. The Avs lost in the second round. This is going backwards chronologically. The Bruins lost the second round. The Lightning lost in the first. And you go all the way back. The last team to win the President's Trophy and to win the Stanley Cup were the Chicago Blackhawks in 2012.
Exactly
13.
10 years
Who
ago.
won the President's Trophy last year?
The Florida Panthers.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this
And they're
is
on the second round to Tampa.
So all the way back to the Blackhawks. Now, and yet, I have a hard time with calling it a curse because if you look at who wins the cup, and I know you're going to this next, it's still a major advantage to be a higher seed in terms of winning cups in the
a
NHL.
higher seed, but not an advantage to be the President's Trophy winner.
So you're the one seed in either conference. You've won since 2000. And the reason I went back to 2000 to check on this with NHL stats is because that's when the league expanded to 30 teams. I know we have 32 now, but Vegas and Seattle haven't been around long enough to really matter that much statistically. One seeds have won the cup 6 times. We have this graph.
Yeah, we have
this.
we have the winners by their final seeding in the regular season.
Yeah, 2 seeds have won it 7 times, and then you go 3 for the 3 and 4 seeds. They've each won it 3 times, although there were no conferences in 2021 due to COVID, as Petey well knows. But then you get beyond that, you get to 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 5 seed has won the cup. 1 6 seed has won the cup. 0 7 seeds have won the cup, and 1 8 seed.
Don't we know?
We all know who that is, don't we, Coyotes fans? It was the LA
I
Kings
know.
in 2012 that won
Where's
the cup.
the damage doll?
So
I know. I just saw it and I knew it was coming. Like, really?
since 2012, only 3 teams below the 4 seed have won the cup in the NHL. We talk about parity in the NHL playoffs, and there is some, but still winning the cup, it's much harder as a lower seed. It just doesn't happen that often. It still happens more than the NBA where you like literally never win the title unless you're a 3 seed or higher, but it's still a much bigger advantage to be like a 1 or 2 seed in the NHL playoffs.
All right. Well, keeping all that in mind, we're going to give our predictions. And
Here we
as we
go.
go series by series, feel free to drop your predictions in the chat. And we'll start with the Islanders and the Hurricanes. And we're not going to do the number of games. You can say it if you want, but for the sake of this, we won't. But we may. Who wants to go first? And we're including Sean.
Where are we starting? Which series?
Islanders,
Islanders,
Hurricanes.
Hurricanes.
Islanders, Hurricanes. I'll happily start on this one because
Okay.
I'm picking an upset. I'm
Islanders?
picking the New York Islanders to win this. Svech is out. All the reasons that Ryan just talked about. I think this team is built for the playoffs. Sorokin has been unbelievable. He's going to be a Vezina Trophy finalist. So I'm going to take the Islanders, which of course means they'll lose the series in like 4 games.
Well,
but-
I was also going to pick the Islanders.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, and the reason like every time we bring up this series, I go, ugh, because it's just like, ugh, ugly, bleh. I don't know. I think if Sorokin is good, it sounds like Barzal is trending toward being back as well. And you mentioned Svechnikov being out, and I'm sorry to
It's a big blow.
former Coyote Shayne Gostisbehere. The Hurricanes power play has struggled, and if you're going to play a really tight defensive team like the Islanders, you need to be find your offense somewhere, and a power play is a perfect place to do that, and they just haven't had it. They've really struggled in the last kind of month of the season, even though they ended up clinching the division. But yeah, if I'm going to pick a quote-unquote upset in any series, it's going to be this one for me. So I'm picking the Islanders. Petey?
I like the Islanders for a lot of reasons. I think they're an inconsistent team through 82. I don't like the way they play over stretches of time. Carolina, to me, is one of the best disciplined system teams in the National Hockey League. Even without Svechnikov, they're going to smother the New York Islanders, and Carolina wins this series probably in 5, maybe 6.
Oh, all right.
DP.
Sean?
I'm going with y'all with the Islanders.
Ooh,
I was
okay.
taking the better
3 and 4 on the
goaltender.
Islanders.
That's all it comes down to for me.
Wow.
I mean, Jacob Slave and Brent Burns, Carolina defends extremely well.
They do.
We're discounting that. I mean, Sorokin's
Hamilton's-
great. They've had great goaltending in the Islanders, for sure. I like players like Nelson. I like players. They got the Brock Nelson, Anders Lee. I like all of those things. Carolina isn't just a one-trick pony. They smother you in all 3 rounds. It's a good hockey team. That's why I wanted to see Florida. If it was Florida, Carolina, I'd take Florida.
Okay.
Yeah,
but it's not.
Fair enough. Albert said Hurricanes, but tough 6 or 7. East Coast Coyotes said Canes in 6. So yeah, I think.
And that's why I'm usually wrong.
And since we're not picking the number of
these
games,
are all
but
great
I'm not
series.
calling a sweep.
Yeah,
They're
they
great
are.
series, and there's
They
really
are.
good hockey teams, and they have all their own storylines. And you will know 2 games in, you'll go, oh my, like LA. LA that year gets an 8th, and you go, oh, they barely made it into the playoffs. By game 3, round 1, you're going, oh my God.
Yeah.
Look at this team. They're strong. They're faster than everybody. They were the best team by a mile in that playoffs.
Yep.
And they rolled it all the way through.
Yes,
so
they did.
we don't know who that team is going to be right now. Maybe somebody catches fire. And maybe some goaltender catches fire.
Yep, very true. All right, next series, Boston, Florida.
Somebody else start.
PD,
Well,
you know a lot about this series.
I do. Taylor Hall is playing on the 3rd line in Boston. The 3rd line. This is the deepest team in the NHL. They can score from the back end. They can defend well. They're good sticks. They tighten up in the house. I like this team a lot. If Ullmark can play game 1 and he's half decent, I'm worried about Jeremy Swayman. Worried. And I know they said, oh, we're 1-2-1-2. Bull.
No.
Swayman is not Ullmark right now. If Ullmark can be ready and start game 1, if Swayman starts game 1 and they lose, this could be a problem.
Because there's pressure at that point.
Pressure. Because then all of a sudden it's going, we're missing Ullmark. You start thinking, if Ullmark plays game 1 and they plays half decent, Boston should roll this Florida team who's been hot at the end of the year. They can score at will, high powered. They got a Montour. The points Montour's put up phenomenal. Tkachuk can be a pest in front of the net, but Boston can play that way. I just think Boston is going to be too good and be too much in this series. I think it's going to go 6, but I like the Boston Bruins.
Sean, on the spot.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Bruins. They're really good. They're one of the best teams of all time. I think if you're picking them to lose in the first round, you're doing it for reasons other than them being better. You're doing it for reasons other than the Panthers being better than the Bruins.
Like
Just
You're
because
just,
you
you're just doing it to like pick. No, you're just doing it to
think
pick
that
it up.
there's someone like the 1 seed has got to
I feel like you would do it because even I was considering it. Like, do I do it just to pick an upset?
Yeah.
And if I'm right, then it's like the best
Wow, you're a
bragging
genius,
rights
yeah.
of all time. But I can't.
Yeah,
But
no,
you think about the
they're
upsets
good.
too. One of the things to create an upset is if you're going to lose like this, the one thing Boston could have if they were younger and if there was a first time through and they blew everybody away with all this young talent. This is like they've got some of the best leaders in hockey
everything.
on this
Yeah.
team.
They've got
Patrice
everything.
Bergeron's a Hall of Fame player that has been there. If they lose game 1 8-1, he is going to that room and say, "Hey, here's where we're at. It's 1 game."
Yeah.
That's the X factor for me because I did think Florida does have enough scoring power to make this interesting.
I think Florida will win some games.
I
in
do
this
too.
series.
They're strong enough to win, but I think Patrice Bergeron's going to shut that door, kick the coaches out, and go, okay, here's where we're at. And that's why I have to go with Boston. I have to.
My thoughts on this series are, first off, I'm glad you brought up Matthew Tkachuk because I think he played at an MVP level down the stretch. He was unbelievable. And I'm not saying he's dragged that team by himself into the playoffs after people thought they were going to be out, but he did a lot of work.
They got 6
He
wins
did.
in the last 8 that got points and 7
He
of the last
was
8 to get in.
incredible
They've been
down the
unreal.
stretch, and he just might be on my heart ballot in top 3 because of the way he played down the stretch and the season that he had after last season when he topped 100 points. And I thought, wow, Matthew Tkachuk just had a career year. Nope, he just topped it this year, and he looks like, I'm going to say this, sorry, Keith, if you're listening, he looks like the best Tkachuk ever right now. The way he is playing, he has been phenomenal. Wow. That said, like you guys all said, this is one of the most complete teams that I've ever seen in the postseason in the Boston Bruins. And it's not just the depth. And Taylor Hall, you mentioned, you want a dark horse guy to pick to really light it up in the playoffs. Think about the matchups Taylor Hall is going to get playing on the third line. Beyond that, the leadership of this team. I have had a man crush on Patrice Bergeron for more than a decade. I think he's one of the more underappreciated stars of this league because he does it in an unconventional way, being the best defensive forward for more than a decade. I want to see Patrice Bergeron get one more cup for validation. He got one, but it was in 2011, which tells you the longevity of this guy as well. He's playing at an elite level for more than a decade. The Bruins are going to win this series.
Yep. I also have Boston. I just can't pick against them. I don't think it'll be a sweep. I think the Panthers will steal one or two. I also can't bet against my own future that I have on the Bruins on BetMGM. I literally have that. And if you look at BetMGM, the best odds for this series is the Bruins to win 4-1. So just interesting.
And I like when I know. Are we going into bets?
No.
Okay, because I want to say one of the things the Boston did. You talk about trade deadline stuff, and one of the things the Boston Bruins did is they didn't go out and get Ryan O'Reilly. They didn't get the big name players. They picked up Tyler Bertuzzi, Garnet Hathaway, and Dmitry Orlov because they fit what they needed to win in the playoffs. Tyler Bertuzzi, look out. He's going to make a name for himself in this series. And you want to play tough? Well, guess what? Garnet Hathaway can play tough. Yeah. So they got the things they didn't have, they have now. I don't know where the holes are in this team unless, like Ryan said, there's injuries. Yeah.
Yes. If they go and win the cup after a 135-point season, we are talking about arguably the best season in NHL history, which is a crazy thing to say.
Wild. All right, moving on. Rangers, Devils, and I thought it was really interesting when Ryan said you could pick either of these teams to win in 7 and you would be like equally right or wrong. It's a tight one. What do you guys got? Who wants to start us off?
I think you should start this time.
All right. I'm gonna choose the Rangers. Okay. I think they have more playoff experience. They made it to the Eastern Conference Final last season. I think that when you get in the playoffs, that veteran leadership that we just mentioned with Boston is severely underrated, and I think that's something that the Rangers team has that the Devils don't right now. I think that the Devils are extremely skilled and are set up for immense success in years to come. I think this, if any series is going to go to 7, it's this one for me. This one's going to be thrilling. I can't wait to tune in. But just slight edge goes to New York, and if Igor Shesterkin is Igor Shesterkin, then without a doubt, the Rangers for me.
Yeah, it's going to come down to goaltending, and I don't know if Jersey Shesterkin hasn't had the year he had a year ago. Nope. Let's start with that. We know he's got it in him, and the New York Rangers were a team that was not supposed to be very good yet last year. They were still in their rebuild. They're kind of getting better, and they make it to the Eastern Finals, and we're very competitive against Tampa. They have more experience with Zibanejad and Kreider. I think New Jersey's young talent is phenomenal. And he mentioned Dougie Hamilton, who's had an absolutely lights-out season. Jersey checks a lot of boxes. I just think the Rangers check more. The concern is different than what Boston did at the trade deadline to pick spots that they needed. The Rangers picked guys that were in the paper all the time.
Big names.
Pick names, Tarasenko and Kane. Whether they needed them to fit into the lineup or not. And I've said this since the beginning. I don't think Patrick Kane was a great fit for this roster. I just don't. And people can call me an idiot if they want to. I'm not sure they have too many of those guys. That is going to make it difficult. Panarin, Kane, they need that gritty element that they just might not have in this series. I still like the Rangers.
John?
I'm going with the Rangers too. First off, Lindy Ruff wasn't able to do it in Buffalo. He wasn't able to do it in Dallas. I'm not going to believe in him to do it here. And then, secondly, I'm just going to go with the team with the better goaltending. And like PD said earlier, this was a team, like, unlike the Bruins, who have a bunch of, like, it's not a bunch of young guys who kind of came out of nowhere. Like, that is kind of what the Devils are. And so I'm going to side with the playoff experience, the guy that scored Stanley Cup winning overtime goals and all of that.
Okay. Well, sorry, Lindy. You guys remember that from earlier this season?
Yeah.
The fans. Sorry, Lindy, that everyone else in this room doubts you, but I don't doubt you now. I'm going to take the Devils in an upset here.
Love it. Be different.
And I'm going to give a shout out to Petey, first of all, who said Patrick Kane's not that good anymore. He's not going to fit here. I don't think he has.
Yeah.
I don't think he's been very good.
He's a good hockey player. He just doesn't fit here in New York.
And I don't think he's been. I think he's been tragically bad defensively. I have concerns about the Rangers, the makeup of that roster. I do feel like they just went and got big names rather than figuring what fit.
Yep.
I like a lot about these Devils. Shesterkin is the wild card. If he steals a series, that can happen because he's an all-world, all-universe goaltender. But I like New Jersey top to bottom. I like them better. I like their defensive metrics, which Ryan just mentioned. And I went and did this story just a couple of years ago looking at, in terms of special teams, I know the NHL.com stat that we ran about power play success. Penalty killing success is a much better indicator of success in the playoffs. The Devils had the 4th best PK unit in the league. I think this team is also built to win. They may not have the experience. That could be their downfall. But I love this team. I shout out Ray Shero every time I mention the Devils for being the architect, basically, of this entire roster, even though he's not the GM anymore. I really like what he's built here. I don't know if they're quite ready, but I'm going to go for it anyway. I'm going to say the Devils are going to upset the Rangers and throw New York into a tizzy.
I'll say this too, Craig, about this series. The Devil Ranger series, whoever wins this series is going to the Eastern Finals.
I agree with that.
I think they get by Carolina or New York.
All right. And on BetMGM, the best odds for this series is the Devils to win 4-3.
7.
I can see that. I think it's going 7 too. I want it to go 7 because this is my favorite series. Even though Tampa's playing Toronto, we're going to talk about that now. This is my favorite series. And it goes all the way back to those years when the Devils were playing the Rangers. Remember the Messier guarantee against the Devils? Remember the Devils having powerhouses earlier? You know, Petey, when you and I were Sean and Leah's age. Remember that? Do you still remember that?
I do.
Okay.
I remember the Montreal Canadiens, Craig.
All right, last series, Toronto-Tampa. I'll start.
You should start this one.
Okay. I am not going to bet against the Tampa Bay Lightning until they give me a reason to. So I am going, this is an emotional hedge for me. I'm picking Tampa to win the series because if I'm wrong, I will gladly be wrong because I would like to see Toronto get past the first round. But I just can't pick against Tampa until they give me a reason to. That's my pick.
Who wants next?
I mean, I'm also picking the Lightning. I was talking about this with Leah the other day. I feel like there's a part of me that's like the Toronto doesn't get past the first round thing has become such a mainstream thing that it's bound to be the year that they do get out of the first round. Yeah. But like Leah said, I mean, A, I'm going to take the better goaltending, like I've been saying, and B, it's the Tampa Bay Lightning. Been doing this for years now. I'm not going to bet against them until they give me a reason to.
All right.
Toronto 7-1-2 in their last 10. They're on fire right now. The only thing that could derail this is their goaltending, but I think they can outscore their goaltending this year for the first time. Tampa Bay is, and I thought this last year going into the playoffs for Tampa, I thought they were tired, and I thought at one point when you taste adversity, when you've been there and done that at some point you're okay, we're tired, and even if it's not conscious that you're not pushing yourself through that mountain, you've been there. And it's hard to get it through. I think Toronto perseveres, and I think they finally get through, and I don't think it goes 7.
I agree with you, too, and I think goaltending's the big question mark for that team.
Yeah, Vasilevsky, I can't believe you're betting. I'm betting against Vasilevsky because he's still the best in the world. But this team, as I just said, Toronto's 7-1-2. They've lost 1 game in regulation in their last 10. Tampa's 4-6.
I don't like Tampa's depth either. I don't think that they're, and we questioned this last year, and then they fooled everybody and won these. I just don't think they're as deep.
They've got
Toronto
the high-end
added
stuff
a lot at the deadline.
For sure.
I think Toronto's ready to take the step, and the guy who will lead them there is Austin Matthews.
I agree. And it won't be Matty Nice. Sorry, Matty Nice.
No.
He's not playing game 1, and I'm not sure when.
I doubt he's going to be a big factor.
There's a Tampa with Point and Kucherov and Vasilevsky and Hedman. Like, this team can win, and it's not like this is a huge upset. I just think finally Toronto, and I don't like what they did at the trade deadline either. I don't think they addressed their needs at goaltending all year. I just think they can outscore any problem they run into.
Sorry. So, Toronto fans, your pain finally ends, at least in the first round.
All right. I love it. The one thing I'll say is the last time the Toronto Maple Leafs made it out of the first round was the last season was the last time I lived in Toronto.
Wow.
And I'm going to Toronto next week. So maybe we'll give some good vibes. Some good vibes out in the universe. Well, those are our picks.
Yep.
Let us know if you agree or disagree.
By the way, if you win that series, you get to play Boston.
Boston Bruins, yeah.
So
Congrats.
So it's
Careful what you
typically
wish
easy
for.
path for the Toronto Maple Leafs to get to the Cup Final.
Yeah, because Toronto's had a lot of playoff success against Boston.
See the damn teams run through
Yeah,
it.
2-goal
See
lead in
damn
the
teams
third
run
period.
through it.
Ask Griff about
Just
that
do it.
one.
Agreed.
2-goal lead in the third in Game 7.
Oopsie. Oy. All right, well, that's our picks. We'll put them out on Twitter after the show, and I will stay true to my picks on the show in my playoff bracket.
I won't. I'll lie.
Okay.
Me
If
too.
I
I'm going to
lose.
fill out the bracket, though, in our
Never said
Discord
that.
one tomorrow because
Okay.
we're going to
Show me
preview the
how.
West. Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to preview the West tomorrow with Sportsnet's Jeff Merrick. So kind of
Yes.
same setup as today, but we're really looking forward to that one tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. The East has kind of dominated the headlines all season, but there's a lot of compelling matchups in the West. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. But listen, the Coyotes, they're off now. We're done with that. So we got some weekends free. There's a lot of fun events coming up at Octane Raceway and Mavericks. A lot of events, actually. In April 30th, there's a VR tournament. You can win up to $1,000. On May 5th, they're doing a Cinco de Mayo $5 Mavericks margaritas.
Oh my God, that's coming up.
It is
$5 off taco
3 days
trios.
before the lottery, buddy.
May 6th, UFC 288. May 14th, Mother's Day brunch. So just a ton of
Yeah,
events.
two things that go really well together: the UFC and Mother's Day brunch.
Well, they're a week apart.
Seriously.
I'm just going down the list.
Seriously,
Okay.
what?
I thought they were one day after the other. Never
Nope,
mind. I don't.
Nope. But you can get summer passes at Octane Raceway with kart racing, VR, axe throwing, multiple games on axe throwing, and you can buy it now. The best rate, graduation parties. It's graduation
If you
season.
haven't done these cars, you got to do the cars.
Yeah, it's so fun.
Do them once and you'll be addicted. I promise.
It's so fun. So check out
They're
Octane Raceway
so
and
cool.
Mavericks. Lots of fun stuff.
Craig was
there.
using his blinker on the go-kart stuff. Excuse me, can I pass here?
Bougie Craig.
Bougie Craig.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
he had his arm signals out in the turns
Oh,
at
man.
Octane.
All right, and last thing before we wrap up, check out OGs. We had a ton of fun at Buds-A-Palooza on Friday. Sean was there. How was Buds-A-Palooza?
That's why Sean's subdued today.
It was quite fun. There was really good food there. It was a really cool experience. Plus, we went to see the Mario movie afterwards.
That's a good thing.
And it was
to
a lot
do
of fun.
on OGs, I feel like.
Yes, it
What did you
was.
see?
It was
Mario
yeah, it was
movie?
very
Oh,
enjoyable.
my kids wanna see
after
it.
OGs?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I
on
enjoyed the Mario
OGs.
movie.
Little OGs,
Unreal.
a little Mario movie.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
it was a vibe.
Love it. So check out OGs. They have great flavors. They have something for everyone. Sleep edition gummies, whatever you need, they have them. So you can find them at your local dispensary at ogsbrands.com. Must be 21 or older to enjoy responsibly. All right, you guys. Well, we got to wrap up because the Suns crew will be live.
It's
in
basketball time.
30
Yeah,
minutes.
whatever.
Yeah,
It's
nobody
playoffs.
cares about.
There's a team that's going to the playoffs
Yeah.
in the Arizona Valley. Exciting time. And I don't care if you root for them or not. Root for a team that's in the playoffs. So let's go Suns. Can't wait.
Gotta happen.
I'm excited.
Gotta happen this year or next year. So
let's go
see it.
Suns.
This franchise is overdue for an NBA.
Let's go
title.
Suns. Let's get on the
Overdue.
wagon. I hurt my
Yep.
groin jumping on the bandwagon earlier
Thanks.
today.
Too much information, but okay.
So stay tuned here on the PHNX Sports YouTube channel. In 30 minutes, the Suns pregame show will be going live. So hit the notification bell so you never miss any time our shows go live. You can follow PHNX Sports wherever you get social media, and you can follow us on Twitter at SPetersHockey, at Leah Merrill, at Craig S. Morgan, at Sean_DePaz. Follow the show at PHNX_Coyotes. We're continuing to put out Coyotes content from Breakup Day, so keep your eye on YouTube for that as well. But everybody, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Enjoy the Suns game, and we'll see everybody tomorrow at 11 a.m. for our Western Conference preview. But until then, have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan Clark.